It is time for another edition of The Winning Ticket. I am Gino Bacola alongside Eric from ETOF21 Sports, and we are getting ready to bring you one of the most diverse sports shows that you will find in the next 45 minutes to an hour. We are going to talk some Friday plays. We'll give you some baseball plays for tonight as the baseball slate is already started, and the baseball slate will continue along with another round of games getting set in the next 40 minutes or so. Then me and Eric will give a look ahead. What are some things we're playing this weekend? For me, I've got a baseball play on Saturday. I've got a couple horse racing plays for Saturday. Eric's going to look at UFC and NASCAR, and then we dive into the AFC South. We will preview the Jags. We'll preview the Titans, the Colts, and the Texans, who I like a little bit. Sneaky Texans. We'll talk about them. Eric, buddy, how's your week been? And you ready to rock and roll?
Week's been good. 4 in a row in baseball. Hoping to carry
Beautiful.
it on to the weekend.
Well, let's keep that momentum rolling. Let's keep that mojo going. Remember, folks, this show is presented by DRF Sportsbook, and we want to let you know that if you are in the state of Iowa, if you know anyone in the state of Iowa, friends, family members, let them know to sign up for an account right now, and you can see our promo code that will scroll across the bottom. You want to use that promo code, and it will give you a $150 match deposit bonus. That's why you use that number, FAST150. Anywhere in the state of Iowa, sign up now for a DRF Sportsbook account so you can make these wagers. We will look at a lot of the lines to discuss the division odds and some of the other ways that we are going to play the AFC. We'll also talk about the way we're going to play some of these baseball games tonight. And Eric, let's get right on into it. I have 2 baseball plays for tonight and then a look ahead play for the weekend. And I'm going to jump right on in, and the game that I have starts pretty soon. So I want to get this one out of the way right off the bat. I'm talking about Baltimore, and I'm talking about Kyle Bradish, and I at least feel good about being on the right side of the number because this is a number that I locked in, and as of last night, it was like plus 145 in the plus 140 range. Now it's down to like plus 120. So it's moving in the right direction. I'm going to roll with Bradish. He's facing Zach Eflin in Tampa, and Tampa's very good, and Eflin's been good. But if we isolate what Bradish has been doing recently, his last 9 starts, most importantly, Baltimore 6-3. So they're winning games that he's starting. He's thrown 54 innings pitched. He has a 2.17 ERA and a 2.04 batting average against, 55 strikeouts in those 54 innings. He's only given up 3 home runs through that stretch. And consistency, no more than 3 earned runs allowed in 9 straight games. Now 6 straight games where he hasn't allowed more than 2 earned runs. He has 15 straight scoreless innings that he's working on, more than 2 starts where he hasn't given up an earned run. His last 5 outings, Baltimore has won 4 of those 5. And the only game they lost in those 5, they lost 1-0 that he started. So he's been as good as possible as of late. You're getting value on him because Tampa's good. Actually, Eflin's coming off of a lackluster start most recently. I'm going to lean with the value here. Let's go Baltimore. Find the best number you can get on the Orioles. That's going to be my first baseball play for tonight as we take a look at DRF Sportsbook, and you can navigate through and find all the different ways you want to play these games. For me, I'll just play this game straight up with the value that I'm getting on this underdog. Talk to us about your first play of the night, Eric.
My first play, I'm going to Motown. I'm taking the Tigers plus 123. Reese Olson is on the mound for the Tigers. Ever since he's been called up, he's looked good. He had one hiccup when he played the Braves when he first got called up. He went 5 1/3 in that game. Oh, sorry. Last game after the All-Star break, last Friday, he went 5 1/3 against the Mariners. This past week, if you look at the Padres, their bats have really struggled. They're only hitting 207 for the week, averaging 4.1 runs per game. Seth Lugal is starting for the Padres. Bad first game back from the All-Star game. ERA in the game, 8.44, gave up 5 runs in 5 innings. Tigers offense has been better since the All-Star break. They're just coming off a 7-game road trip where they went 5-2, getting that smash spot when you come home, big road trip. Padres in the middle of a long road trip. They actually have one more series after this before they go home. So I'm just going to look to play the Tigers in the spot plus 123. Plus, you just look at the Tigers splits. Offense is completely better at home. Plus, Green and Baddoo are back in the lineup. So I bet the Tigers here plus 123.
Tigers, another dog for Eric. Let's move to my next baseball play for the evening. I'm going to roll with the Brewers. They're a slight home underdog, plus 105. They're still in that plus 100 to 105 range. And tonight it's going to be Peralta. He's actually coming off a game where he went 6 innings pitched. He only gave up 1 hit and 6 strikeouts against the Reds. His last 8 starts, while his ERA and splits may look a little high, I think he's going to regress in a positive way, that we may get some positive regression, because he's thrown 43 and 2/3 innings pitched. He's struck out 55 in his last 43 innings, and he has a 185 batting average against. Milwaukee's won 8 of their last 10. I think there's value on him because they're playing against Atlanta and Mike Soroka. And Soroka just has been banged up this year, and he's really struggled. He's only pitched in 5 games this year. He started on July the 5th. He went 4 2/3 innings. He gave up 5 hits, no runs, and 3 walks at Cleveland. Then he came out of relief on July 16th. He went 3 innings in the late part of the game. He gave up 3 hits and 2 runs. You're going to give me value on a pitcher who I think has some sneaky good numbers as of late and possibly trending in the right direction, versus someone who hasn't even started very many games this year, and I don't know how long we're going to get out of him. So I'll take the dog here, the home dog, and get some plus money on the Brewers for my second and final play of Friday. You've got one more baseball.
I love that bet. That was actually my bet, and I changed it when I saw you were on it. So
nice. Okay.
I am going to a player prop here. Believe it or not, Ruiz of the Nationals, he has the best batting average post All-Star game. So I'm going to look to take advantage of that. You can get his over 1.5 bases at plus 130. He's batting .471 since the All-Star break. This year, he's batting .286 against lefties. Wood is on the mound for the Giants. Wood has given up more hits on the road than at home. Look, I'm just going to play the hot bat here. I'm getting plus money and over plus 130 total bases. So I'm on Luis over 1.5 bases at plus 130.
Let's move from Friday to Saturday. Let's look ahead to the weekend. For the weekend look ahead, I have a baseball play for Saturday and 2 horse racing plays I want to give out. Eric's going to talk some NASCAR and some UFC. For me, for the baseball look ahead, I'm going to look at Toronto and Seattle, and I'm going to play both of these pitchers have been really pitching well as of late. So I think a low total in here. I'm going to roll to the under in the 7 range. I think that number is accurate. I just don't expect a whole lot of runs to be scored in this game at Seattle. Logan Gilbert, last 6 games. So 39 innings pitched. We're talking a nice sample size here. He has a 2.29 ERA, 31 hits in that stretch. He's only given up 3 home runs in those 6 games and a 2.17 batting average against. Facing Kevin Gausman, who's also been dealing as of late. His last 5 games, he's only given up a 2.79 ERA. He's only given up 25 hits in the 29 innings, 2.27 batting average against, 36 strikeouts in those 29 innings. So 2 pitchers that are dealing. Ballpark that we saw not in Home Run Derby recently, not an easy ballpark to hit the ball out of a lot of the time. So I'm rolling in the under there tonight. And we got the man pulling the strings back there, Jack Fitzpatrick, giving you all the great stats as we lay them out for you. Our producer, Jack, there from DRF Sports. Eric, look ahead. Which one are you going to talk about first for your weekend look ahead?
UFC in London this weekend. I'm going Molly McCann, TKO or KO plus 175. Look, the girl she's fighting, and I'll be honest, I cannot pronounce names worth a crap, so I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. She's 1-4 in her last 5 fights. And her lone win was against Jessica Reese Clark, who's no longer with the UFC anymore. So she really hasn't proven she can fight at this level. She's going to try to take Molly down to the ground because she has a great submission game. But Molly's takedown defense has improved, and I don't think she's going to be able to get Molly to the ground. Plus, the girl she's fighting, whose first name I believe is pronounced Jilija, which I probably just slaughtered. She usually walks around about 140, 145, and she's fought at a bigger weight class. Now she's dropping down to 125. I wanted to watch the weigh-in to kind of see physically how she looked. She didn't look the best, and we've seen it when these fighters drop down and they drop down a lot of weight. This affects their cardio. This affects their strength. If they're a grappler, this affects their ability to get the fight to the ground. And I think that's going to be the case here, and we've seen what happens when Molly faces a grappler and she's able to keep the fight on the ground. I like Molly here to win this in the knockout fashion at plus 175 price.
So we go from baseball to some UFC in so many different ways you can play. Also, as Eric was pointing out, different ways that you can wager on the fights. As I will transition over to some horse racing for the weekend. It is a big weekend over at Monmouth Park as they have the Haskell. And before the Haskell, they have some really good undercard races. And one of those races is going to go as race number 11. And honestly, it's not the strongest grade 1 race in the world. And I'm looking at a horse who's sharp, who's coming in, is in really nice form, and who's pretty versatile, has sort of a tactical edge that he may be able to have on a lot of the group. That's the number 3, Catnip. This is a horse who's 4-1 on the morning line. Most recently, he won at Monmouth Park in a local prep for this. And the horse to beat in this race is a deep closer. I just think Catnip is going to get the jump on him. If he's good enough, he'll have every chance to prove it. That's the number 3, Catnip, race number 11 at Monmouth Park on Saturday. Eric, you're going to head from the UFC to NASCAR.
Yep, in Pocono this weekend. And look, I'm going to take Harvick over Logano. The fun thing about NASCAR is you can bet to win top 3, top 5, top 10 head-to-head matchups. There's different ways you can bet, and I'm really going to attack this one just because I don't like any of the odds to straight up win. Harvick has the 3rd best average over the last 6 at 8.4 average finish. Logano's average finish, 25 best, 19.4. The last 20 races Logano has raced here, he only has 3 top 5s. The last 20 races Harvick has raced here, he has 11 top 5s. Now, if we just look at what Harvick has done here, take out last year's race where a wreck kind of cost him, his 5 previous races, 4, 8, 2, 1, 6. I mean, the guy just dominates here. This is his last go around at NASCAR because he's retiring after this year. I think this is a great head-to-head matchup given his track history and Logano's track history. I'm going to take Harvick here in the head-to-head matchup.
And Eric, when you're playing, what determines like what way you play, right? Because there are different ways you play, right? Do you play particularly are you always going to play someone just based on certain odds? Do you play particular finishes, or is that something?
To me, it just kind of looks like I take how I start it is I take the guys I like and the guys I want to fade. And then I just kind of look, is there a matchup with the guys I like versus
head to heads
to fade? Do that. If one of the guys I like has a good price, then I'll do that. This week, I like Hamlin, but Hamlin's the race favorite. So I'm not about to play a plus 500 on a race favorite. So that's why I'm really attacking this head-to-head matchup.
That is NASCAR coming up this weekend. I've got one more weekend look ahead play for you. It's in the big race at Monmouth Park. It is the grade 1 Haskell. That's going to go as race number 12 on Saturday. We're going to see a really good field lined up. The Kentucky Derby winner, Mage, is going to be running in that race. You're also going to see Tapit Trice, who was 3rd in the Belmont. Tapit Trice we saw run in the Kentucky Derby. You're going to see a really nice horse named Arabian Night, who won the Southwest. You're going to see a horse named Extra Anejo, who's also very, very sharp up and coming. But I like Go Rocket Ride, the number 1 from the inside. This is a horse who was going to run in the Santa Anita Derby and try to get into the Kentucky Derby, but he had to miss the race right before that, just some small physical issues. And now he's been able to kind of grow up a little bit. I don't think he's going to be as maybe worn down as some of these horses who have had longer campaigns already in the year. Go Rocket Ride should sit a beautiful trip from the inside. He's 9-2 on the morning line. So with the 9-2 shot and a 4-1 shot, again, we hit 1 or 2 of these horses in the long term. Doesn't take a whole lot for you to make some money and turn a positive. That is Saturday over at Monmouth Park. My final look ahead play for Saturday. Eric, let's make the transition over to the final segment of our show this week, and that's going to be the AFC South preview. We are going to look at 4 teams led by the Jacksonville Jags. They are the favorites to win this division. Their win total is in like the 9.5 range. We saw a big turnaround from Jacksonville last year. Eric, a couple years ago, they were a laughing stock with Urban Meyer. Doug Peterson came in, was able to get this team to believe in themselves after a slow start to the year. They ended up really improving towards the end of the season, and they make a playoffs. They host a playoff game. They're down 27-0, I believe. They come all the way back and win 31-30 in a crazy, crazy game. Let's dive into the Jacksonville Jags a little bit. They're your minus 150 favorite in this division.
So let me start out by saying I'm not a Peterson guy, but I have to give Peterson credit. He installed an offense that is similar to what Lawrence did at Clemson, heavy use of the shotgun and RPO. So Lawrence obviously looked a million times better than the year before when he had Urban Meyer, who, let's place it, didn't give him a chance to succeed. The offensive line to me isn't concerned. They lost Taylor, who had his best season last year. And then they lost Taylor, who had his best season last year. Plus, Ken Robinson is out of the first 4 games. That means they're going to be depending on rookie Harrison at right tackle and Walter Little, who they drafted the year before to work the blind side. That's really concerning for me. Also, it's interesting to me, they used a high draft capital on Tank Bigsby, and they just drafted Travis Etienne, whose contract's not going to be coming up for a couple years. So why are you doing that? We saw in that playoff game last year that he disappeared. Etienne disappeared that second half. No one knew where he was. It never came out that he was hurt. He just wasn't there. Now, if we look at his production, at the beginning of the year before the bye, he averaged 72.5 yards rushing per game. After the bye, he was averaging only 57 yards per game rushing. So you have an outside rusher. Both tackles are gone, at least for the first 4 games. Your best offensive lineman the year before is gone. You just used high draft capital on a running back. This tells me we're due for a down year with Travis Etienne in terms of rushing. So my first bet with this team is under 950.5 yards rushing for Travis Etienne. The wide receiver room, really interesting. You got Calvin Ridley coming in from suspension. They have 116 abandoned targets from last season. So I really don't think Ridley is going to be cutting into as many targets as people think. Obviously, with Ridley coming in, this is going to allow Kirk to move to the slot where he's going to be a lot more effective. Better matchups can work the middle of the field. Obviously, the one guy that it's going to affect is Zay Jones. I think Zay Jones's production is going to drop if I had to pick someone. Last year, I was really big on Evan Ingram. Great year. But they drafted Strange. I really think drafting Strange is going to cut into his productivity. So I'm going to be out on Evan Ingram this year. In terms of the defense, the thing that worries me is this team was bottom 10 in sacks, and their DBs are a nightmare. You can't throw on this team. So if we don't see Walker and Allen take that step forward and able to get to the quarterback and create some havoc and rush the quarterback through the progressions, quarterbacks are going to be able to pick the secondary apart. I'm a little low on this team, especially with how their schedule lays out, where they have back-to-back games in London, have to fly back, play a divisional foe in the Colts for the second time. So the Colts will already have film on what they're trying to do. And then you have a short week going to New Orleans. I'm just really down. I don't like how their schedule plays out. I think some of these other teams are going to be a little bit better than the market realizes. I didn't do anything on this team. This is going to be a team I look to fade in certain spots, a lot of situational spots. But my only bet is going to be under 950.5 yards rushing for Travis Etienne.
We would love to hear from you. I will share this with everybody because it's a gambling show. And if you have just sort of like seen my energy shift in the last second, it's opening day at Del Mar, and I'm playing a few things here and there. So just kind of keeping an eye on a race or two. And I played a horse to win, and I have this horse in like pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, everything, which I was alive. The horse has the lead about 50 yards from home and gets nailed at 32-1 and runs second, which is just like, I almost need Jack to call a timeout so I can go vomit and then just come right back over here, because that's going to stick with you for a long time. 32-1, you just bet $10 to win on a horse like that. And you are in really good shape. So imagine if somebody bet like 100 to win on a horse like that. Think about where they would be, or how well it would be if, a pick 4 or a pick 5 with that horse happened. So yeah, always fun.
I was knocked out in the first leg of my pick 5 ticket. So I
that
had stopped watching at 401. So
yeah. So that was a fun one, as I was like, oh, okay. I saw the horse opening up and I was just like, okay. And then just shift, attitude change. And that's kind of how I feel like with the Jags this year too, Eric. I think you and I are both cold on them. Last year things broke really well for them. And we have to give them all the credit in the world for Peterson coming in. They start 2-6. They win 7 of their final 9. They won 6 of their final 7. They end up hosting that playoff game. Lawrence, only the second quarterback since 1950 to double his wins and passing touchdowns in year 2 while cutting his interceptions in half. The only other guy to do that was Drew Brees. Jack pointed out they bring in Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver. He averaged 82.8 receiving yards per game in his last 2 full seasons. That was 5th highest during that mark. So positive there for them. The offensive line is also a worry, though. They're going to be without starting left tackle Cam Robinson due to a suspension. They lost their best graded pass protector from last year. They drafted a replacement, but it may take a little while for them. And then the schedule. They got to spend 2 weeks in London. We don't really know how that's going to be for a team that's never done it before, right? How is that going to impact them? And weeks 10 through 16, I'm a little bit concerned of with their schedule too. As you look at weeks 10 through 16, San Francisco, that's coming back from the bye. They play Tennessee, who always gets up in a divisional game there. You go at Houston, and then you play Cincy, Cleveland, Baltimore, 3 games in a row where you could lose all 3 of those games against AFC North rivals. So, I think the Jags schedule is tough. I see them as like an 8-9 win team this year. I would go under their 9.5 win total. And Eric, I think your assessment overall of the division is exactly how I feel. I think they're a little overhyped. And I think all 3 of the other teams are all kind of talked about, and the common perception of them is that they're not very good. And I actually think all 3 of those teams are a little bit better than what most people do. And I think the Jags are a little bit worse. So for all of that, I think their schedule is going to be a little more competitive. I don't think they're going to have as many gimme games as others may think they do. I'm under on the Jags. Anything else you want to mention about Jacksonville? Yeah, is the AFC South underrated?
I think some teams are a little bit underrated. I think the Jags are overrated.
Well, it's definitely competitive, I think. Right? It should be competitive, and it should be a good division, I think, because it's competitive. Will these teams step out of the division and perform well against like other top teams? I don't know, but I don't think the difference between the top and the bottom is that much.
To me, it's a 1 playoff league. One playoff
team, especially in the AFC.
Whoever wins it, they're not going to get a wild card in my eyes.
Let's continue along, Eric. We go to Tennessee. The Titans over-under is 7.5. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, seems to be determined to run the ball, and looks like he is on the same page with Vrabel. This team started 7-3 last year, and then they had the issues with quarterback injuries. They didn't win another game. They were 32nd in passing yards allowed. Bring in a veteran, Murphy Bunting. He's up and down. He's not fantastic, but he's actually better than what they had out there last year. A lot's happened with their offensive line, Eric. Lots of moving pieces. They cut 2 other players, signed with different teams. They drafted an offensive lineman that may be really, really good. They were bad last year, so it'll be interesting to see how all these new pieces fit together. I do think their defense is going to be a lot better because they had some injuries last year. They were very good at stopping the run. I think they'll be better at stopping the pass. And they addressed one of their major needs and a major weakness just recently, bringing in Hopkins, because they didn't really have that number 1 or really even like a number 2 wide receiver. There were just a lot of unproven pass catchers out there. Now you put Hopkins in with the rest of their pass catchers. I think everybody kind of slots in a little bit better. You've got Kyle Phillips, Westbrook-Ikhine. You've got the tight end, Okonkwo, who I thought was very good last year and extremely impressive towards the end of the season. So, yeah, I think this is a team that, because I really believe in Vrabel as a coach, this to me feels like a Vrabel type team. I think he's going to get the most out of them. I don't think this is a team that can win the Super Bowl. I probably wouldn't even pick this team to win a playoff game. But can they win a division that's competitive and a division that might be separated by a game or two? I think so. I think there are going to be a lot of times when Vrabel's out there and he has an advantage over whomever he's standing up against, two brand new coaches in this division. First time head coaches. So he has an experience edge there. You've always been a pretty big Vrabel guy too, right, Eric?
I'm a huge Vrabel guy. Vrabel is my boy. Obviously, the big thing with Hopkins coming in is just going to slot Burks down. Burks is going to get better matchups in the DB room. Obviously, Hopkins is here because Tim Kelly, their offensive coordinator, worked with him in Houston. They have a real relationship. Kelly's offense is going to be a lot more of the shotgun. It's not going to be the traditional under the center stuff we've seen in the past from the Tennessee Titans. And I think you mentioned them running the ball. They're also going to have to go back to what Arthur Smith did really good here. When Arthur Smith was the OC here, they were top 3 consistently in play action passing. I think they need to get back to that play action pass that they used to have back during the Arthur Smith days. Another thing that stood out to me is, let's kind of look at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's production went down in the second half versus the first half. This was the first time in his career it happened. And I think they did something to address that. They drafted Spears from Tulane, who I think is going to get more run in the first half than you're going to lean on Derrick Henry in the second half because he is so big to lean and take the physical pounding against the defense. You mentioned the offensive line. I think it's going to be better than last season. They got Aaron Brewer. He's going to move from the guard position over to center. They're bringing in Bunskill from the 49ers. He's going to start the right guard position. My boy, Big Pete from Northwestern, he's going to start at left guard. Dillard from the Eagles, he's going to start at the left tackle. The only question mark right now is the other tackle position. They drafted a kid who is suspended for the first 6 games, so it's looking like Radnows, who came in from North Dakota State last year, is going to start at right tackle. I like their tight end a lot. He was 3rd on the team in red zone TDs and targets. I think he's kind of a sneaky DFS type play. Also, in terms of the defense, I really think the key for their defense, can Weaver take that next step? They need that pass rusher to go along with the good interior. They were really good stopping the run last year, struggle getting into the quarterback. I think Weaver's going to take that extra step. I think we're going to see a vast improvement of sacks. He had 5.5 last year. I think the young talent that they have in the DB room, because they've used a lot of high draft picks on those DBs, I think we're going to see them take that step forward. I like the Titans here. I actually bet the Titans at plus 360 to win the division.
Titans are a play to win the division for Eric at plus 360. I think if you're looking to play the division, this is probably the best bet for a team to win the division, because what you get is a solid coach. You get a team that has some experience. And while we think that Indy and Houston are going to be better than most people do, it still would be asking a lot for them to improve enough to win the division in here. So you sort of process of elimination, if you don't want to bet the favorite at plus 360, I think Tennessee is a really solid value. As you sort of talk it out in your head. Let's go to the second half of this division, Eric. Let's go Colts, and then we'll hit the Texans. Colts over-under is around 6.5. Bringing a new head coach who's a former offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Done really good work with Jalen Hurts. Should be able to get a lot out of the young quarterback, Richardson. My guy, Minshew Mania. He's the backup quarterback for the rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson. I mean, last year, this team was an absolute mess. They fire their head coach during the season. They replace him with a coach who had 0 coaching experience, who had just been on TV at the time. So it wasn't strange to see them struggle. And it was a bad year for Taylor. He had 1,800 yards 2 years ago. Last year, he just couldn't get anything going. He was banged up. The offensive line was bad. They had all the weird coaching stuff going on. They were behind in a lot of games. So he wasn't going to continue to run the ball in games where they were getting beat up. They probably couldn't have had a worse year for an offensive line last year. And it's going to be better. Like, they have some legitimately talented players who should be better. Eric, I know you're kind of high on this team and the fact that they could at least be a feisty team and better than the overall perception. It's just going to come down to, is Richardson the guy? I've never really been that high on him, and I'm willing to change my opinion on quarterbacks. Tua's already sort of getting there. Herbert, someone who I didn't think would ever be as good as he is, but I was never impressed with how Richardson threw the ball. Talk to us about the Colts.
So I think they just need to give Richardson the keys to the castle. They need to see what they have in there. I'm not a big Minshew guy. With the offense, it's going to be RPO offense, 4 wide receivers running vertical routes with the tight end running a drag. You got to let Richardson cook. You got to put him down there, do the RPO, force the D lineman to either commit to Taylor or him, and then run some RPOs with Pierce or Pittman going deep. You have to see what he can do. I'm not a Richardson guy either. When he played against what I consider elite schools in the SEC, 53% completion percentage, 1-to-1 TD to INT ratio. Those numbers don't scream, oh my God. And he never beat any of those teams, the Tennessees, the Georgias, the Alabamas, never got any wins against those games. Also, the offensive line you mentioned struggle. Kelly had his worst season, but look, he went through something you and I could never imagine. The fact he was even out there as a victory, I think he's going to take a step forward after last year. Nelson, who's historically been good, struggled last year. I think he's going to take a step forward, get back.
New coach, right?
Yep, close to the norm with his playing level. I thought their 2 tackles, Smith and CMU's finest, Raymond, I thought they played well. I think those guys, since they're young, they're going to take another step forward. I think this offensive line is going to do good. I think they're going to give Richardson time to do his thing. Is Richardson going to be that guy that can take that next step? Because we've seen the coach develop Herbert, develop Hurts, have those guys take the next step to where they are, because both those guys are top 5 quarterbacks. If he can do that with Richardson toward the end of the season, this is a team we're going to have to look to be invested in. But both you and I, based on what Richardson did at Florida,
I'm worried. That's why I got to see exactly. We got to see it a little bit first before we jump in. And sometimes that's hard as a gambler, right? Because if you like them and if you believe in Richardson, then go jump in on them. Like if you think he's going to be better than we do, you need to go in on him. But I think it's going to be a real learning process for him throwing the ball, because I think they're going to start to stack boxes against him, in particular with Taylor, because that they know that's what the Colts want to do.
That's the thing. Like if Richardson can't complete that pass, if he's not getting the reads, overthrowing targets, they're going to stack the box, and you're not going to let Taylor be able to be Jonathan Taylor when he's going against stacked boxes. On top of that, what do they do if Richardson's not the guy? Do they just throw out Minshew right there? This all depends on what Minshew is what Richardson is able to do. Is he able to take that step, develop to be that elite guy that the Colts think he is because they did use draft capital on him? Taylor, look, he was hurt. I still think he's going to take that step forward with the improving the offensive line. The wide receiver to watch, my boy Pierce. I think they're going to use him a lot more on fly routes. I think that he's going to get open. He's going to take the advantage of Richardson's arm. And let's face it, you had Matt Ryan there last year. Ryan's arm strength is nowhere near what Richardson has. So they're going to take some shots down the field. It's going to be an interesting team. And I'll tell you this, home divisional dog week 1, I'm all in on the Colts week 1. I just got to wait for that number to move a little bit more.
Yeah, they have 2 of the first 3 on the road. Then they do play Germany in week 10. I don't think they can win the division, but I think they're going to be a football team that's led by adults that are like coaches that know what they're doing. I mean, we had legitimately coaches last year who hadn't put together like a game plan or called plays that were out there in charge of Indianapolis for the second half of the season. So, Eric, any of these numbers that you would look at, or anything like to make playoffs or anything for them? More just like a week to week with them.
Week to week thing. Yeah. You're going to have to kind of see what they are. Situational spots, maybe some Pierce props from game to game, but that would be it for me. I think there's way too much ceiling floor differential.
Yeah, wide range of outcomes with them. As we move to our final team, Eric, I like this team this year, man. I like the Texans. Their over under is 6.5. And one of my strong plays is their over, and even an adjusted over, an alternative over, where I think if you bump it up to 7.5, you get even better value. Like you can find that in the almost 200 range, like the plus 190 ish range. So reasons why I think the Texans will be a lot better team this year. New head coach, D'Amico Ryans, former defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Bring along safety Jimmy Ward, second-year safety Stingley Jr. He was the third overall pick. He got hurt last year. All signs are that he's ready to take a big step forward in year number 2. So now, keep in mind, you've got a new defensive head coach who brings in a real key defensive player that he knows well, and he's a veteran, and he's going to help this young safety and the young secondary improve. They also have another draft pick from 2022. I think the secondary is going to be a real strength for the Texans. Let's check that box off. They draft Will Anderson, the rookie pass rusher. They give up a bunch to get him, but if he's impactful, it won't matter because they had a lot of assets to give up. So now if he's impactful and he's good on the defensive front and the back of the defense is good, you move to the offense. You have a quarterback that you just drafted. You were able to get one of your guys. You bringing in a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, young offensive whiz. He was in San Francisco. So you're going to get a lot of that San Francisco style offense, motion, moving pieces. They're going to make life easy on Stroud here. The offensive line, they signed Tunsil to a 3-year contract extension. This is a Pro Bowler. So now he can help your new franchise quarterback rookie. They also bring in Shaq Mason, who's a veteran coming off a poor year, but he's got some upside. It's a nice, just low cost move. They used the 2nd-round pick on an interior offensive lineman. They have a former 1st-round pick, Howard, that they think will continue to improve. So man, you go through almost all of the units that they have compared to last year. I think they're all going to be much improved. I like the staff. I feel like you went and got a young coach now that you're going to or a coach that's going to grow with this team. The last 2 years they've had Culley and then Lovey, and you just didn't really feel like either of those guys had a long shelf life with the Texans. They didn't really know what they were doing because they had Mills there. They didn't really have their guy. They've got their franchise quarterback. They've got a couple of their franchise players on defense. They've got Pierce, who had almost 1,000 rushing yards in 13 games last year before the season was ended. And then even at receiver, you bring in a veteran, Robert Woods. You have Noah Brown. They brought in Dalton Schultz, tight end. He's played at least 14 games 3 years in a row. He's had 55 catches, at least 570 yards 3 years in a row, 17 touchdowns. So the best things you can do for a rookie young quarterback, Eric, give him a nice offensive line or a couple offensive linemen that'll keep him safe. Give him a big target with a tight end that's been out there week in, week out. And you've got a veteran like Robert Woods in the locker room to help the young kid and to kind of help him grow. I just like what they've done. I like the way they've built this team. Are they a Super Bowl winner? No. But could they be like 4 or 5 wins better than they were last year? Absolutely. Like, I think this team could be very close to a 500 team, maybe even slightly above in a wide open division. It concerns me to play them like even to get to the playoffs in something like that, because I don't think they have a chance as like a wild card, right? Like you said, it probably won't be that case, but can they be really feisty in this division and sneak up on teams that look at the Texans and circle them as like an easy spot? I think so, Eric. So I just talked about the Texans more than their head coach probably would talk about the Texans. I'm all in this year. And even if we get an injury to our starting quarterback, Eric's favorite player in the entire NFL is that beautiful long-necked Davis Mills. Gorgeous neck.
Davis Mills. But I will say this. I like this team too. I did bet the win total like you, but I only bet the 6.5. To me, they drafted the best quarterback in the draft in CJ Stroud, and he's going to go in a great situation because of their offensive line. I really don't think people realize how good this line is. You have Howard and Tunsil, great bookend tackles. Then they added Scruggs, who's going to be the center. And then you signed Shaq Mason, who graded out as a great run blocker last year. So I think this offensive line is going to give Stroud time to get the ball out of his hands. You mentioned their offensive coordinator. He comes from the Shanahan school. So this is going to be a lot like what the 49ers did. A lot of zone blocking, a lot of quick hitting stuff to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands fast. One guy who I really like, but there's no props left, you mentioned him, Dalton Schultz. You just looked at the history of the 49ers offense. When they had a rookie come in, you look at Purdy, how much he targeted the tight end when he first started. The offense filters to the tight end, so I really think Dalton Schultz with the tight end drag routes, I think that's going to be a good bet. As soon as those props hit, I'm going to be looking to bet that. And another player that I absolutely love in this offense is Dameon Pierce. I think with the improved offensive line, we are going to see a huge step forward for this second year back out of Florida with the zone concept.
And I think even with, like, again, with a young QB, I could see him he didn't catch a whole lot of passes last year, but I could see them needing to dump off to him sometimes, right? Try to get him more involved. Just get your playmakers the ball more, right? Get the ball in his hands as much as possible.
And with an improved offensive line, a rookie quarterback, as you mentioned, I think they're going to lean on the running game a little bit more. I bet his over 875.5 yards rushing. Look, he missed time last year. He really didn't take that much of a pounding. What I was told was he could come back for the last 2 games, but they just didn't have him come back. They wanted to rest him up for this season with the improved offensive line. I think he's actually a little bit of a dark horse to lead the league in rushing. I found this at 35-1.
Sure.
I like that too. I think this offense is going to surprise a lot of people. Defensively, for them to be successful, they needed a pass rusher. They brought in Will Anderson. That's why they use that high draft capital, so the DeMeco Ryan defense can work to get to the quarterback, rush through his progressions. I think the DBs, you mentioned them, they're good. They're not as bad as people think they were. And when you look at what they did last year, is they were able to create some turnovers. I think the DBs are going to take a step forward. I think with the change of leadership, we're going to see a different mentality. I really like this team. I bet them over 6.5. I didn't do the alternate like you, and I'm all in on Pierce. And as soon as Dalton Schultz props come out, I'll be looking to take him. I think Schultz is going to be that tight end you can get in a later round that's going to help lead you to a fantasy football title.
Here we go. We're going to be leading the hype train all year long. The Texans, baby. Me and Eric, we're going to be on that bandwagon. Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with us again here. I love how much ground we're able to cover on this show. You're not going to find many other gambling shows like it. We'll give you some for today, some for tomorrow, and some for the future, and we'll do that moving forward. Still 5 more NFL divisions to cover, 1 more in the AFC as we head out west for the AFC West next week. So if you want to kind of follow along with us and take some notes or take a look and dive into some of the AFC West teams and maybe how we'll attack them and we'll wager on them. Week 3 of the winning ticket is in the books. Don't forget, again, if you're anywhere in the state of Iowa, use our promo code scrolling right across the bottom, FAST150. Sign up for an account right now for a DRF Sportsbook account. You can play along with us each and every week. We'll be back again next week on Friday. Eric, good luck for all your plays this weekend. And Jack Fitzpatrick, thanks so much for producing the show. Make sure to head to DRF Sportsbook for all of your wagering needs.